I'm Stephen Hill. I'm a fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers. I live in the smallest county in England called Rutland, which is in between Cambridgeshire, Northamptonshire, Leicestershire, and Lincolnshire.
You know, the very essence of the mental game is this. The only reason an event matters is because we make it matter.
Welcome to the Mullins Farrier Podcast.
Every horse, whatever it was doing, had a season. Once their competition season finished, they took the shoes off, they chucked it out in the field with some other horses, and it had a 2, maybe 3 months period where it went and remembered what being a horse was all about.
Even in a cheaper area, your prices should be set by your skill level, by your experience. And some people might not feel that they're worth, as much as others. But if you're only charging $160 to shoe a horse, then the only way you're making money is on your trims.
The WCB was a way to make sure that you kept the trade alive. I think I'm a custodian of the trade, so it's like we have to keep it going.
It was hard, but you adapt and overcome, and that probably gets to me where I am now. It's problem solving, horseshoeing's problem solving, and back in the day it was problem solving how to be as strong as the older apprentice is. So it's all about adapting and overcoming, which was good.
I know we learn every day, but you do have to put yourself outside the box and just continue to learn, which is why I was just trying to do my fellowship, because I still have apprentices, and if I stay at my AW, I'm stagnant.
Welcome, everyone. Please pardon the raspy voice, as I've just returned back from a whirlwind tour down to Heartland Horseshoeing School, where they were hosting Jonathan Nunn, who taught us all things in regards to the AWCF exam. As usual, Jonathan did an incredible job downloading tons of information on us, and it was so much fun hanging out with such a good group of people, all willing to humble themselves to get better at what they do. Now for a little shopkeeping. So there are some big changes coming with the podcast in the near future. I'm a person who endeavors to be totally self-sufficient. Often this is to a fault, and I will forego asking for help far longer than I should. I'm sure you've heard me recount stories on here of people who've asked me how profitable the podcast is. And even with the help of a few generous sponsors over the years, including those folks out there who've bought us a coffee, the lion's share of the cost has been out of pocket. In order to maintain the pace and quality that you've come to expect from this podcast, I'm finally going to ask for your help. On August 12th, the podcast is going to move to a subscription-based model. Partial episodes will be available without cost, but full access will be through the subscription only. Many of you have told me how certain episodes really resonated with you and that you've listened to them multiple times. I don't want to take that away from you, so the current library of episodes will remain available free of charge, even after the 12th. I'm aware that some of our listeners are in the midst of apprenticeships or in situations where the added cost of a podcast subscription is not viable. I never want someone's financial situation to inhibit them from having access to our content. So if you find yourself in this camp, DM me on Facebook Messenger, and we will work something out. As well, those of you who have been supporting us with a monthly subscription purchase of a coffee, please reach out to me on Messenger as well, as I don't have your contact information, and I would like to thank you for your loyalty and support by adding a credit to your subscription account. It has been an honor and humbling to be a part of so many of your lives and the farrier community as a whole. This is a big, scary step, but one that we have to take, and I hope that you've found enough value in what we've done over the years to join us and help us with this next chapter. And now for today's guest. Stephen came highly recommended by many farriers over in England while I was there for Stoneleigh, and thanks to an introduction from Jamie Hughes, I was able to sit down with him and do this interview. You will notice this common theme from many of the interviews that I did over there, wherein the guests and I go into deep detail about certain shoeing concepts. And while Stephen alludes to the fact that audio probably isn't the best platform for describing some of these three-dimensional concepts, he and many of the other guests are so articulate in describing what it is they're talking about that it's pretty easy for us to see in our minds what it is they're describing. This is one you're probably going to want to pause and rewind several times to gather all the information that Stephen shares here. I know I have myself. Anyway, this was a lot of fun, and I learned a ton. And I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All the cheers.
Is indeed.
You have come up a few times in conversations. It sounds like you have quite the influence over folks over here.
I wouldn't know about that. I'm quite enthusiastic. Sometimes a bit too enthusiastic.
We could start with how you got your start as a shoer, and then why you chose to take it to the full extent of getting your FWCF.
Okay, so my dad was an amateur racehorse trainer, horse dealer, farmer, quite a character, very well known in his area. I rode from a very young age, but unfortunately I had a nasty fall. I broke my neck and my upper jaw when I was dragged when I was 5. Didn't really have much to do with horses till I was about 12. And one day I decided I wanted to go hunting. And my sister was a very keen rider. She's older than me. She had ponies where she jumped and so on and competed. And when I was younger, if anybody had said that I would be going on to be a point-to-point jockey and eventing and being huntsman for several different packs of hounds, being as horsey as I am or was, they wouldn't have believed you. And my sister doesn't ride at all. She stopped at the age of 15. At 12, I hardly missed a day's hunting on a Saturday. That's my big passion.
Oh, okay.
Horses have always been there in my life. I watched my dad having a very nice lifestyle, but never really making any money. We had Martin Deacon shoeing our horses back then. My dad would have about between 80 and 100 horses about, but we'd have between 15 and 25 in work at any one time.
Okay.
So the farrier was there every week. And we had another farrier called William Williams. I spent a lot of time watching them, and it was either going to be a helicopter pilot, a vet, or a farrier. Because I wasn't particularly academic at school, farrier it was.
Okay. So you went through the apprenticeship program. Who did you apprentice with?
A chap called Stephen Gowen. He's renowned heavy horse shoer. His father, Richard Gowen, was an honorary fellow. He was an amazing character, had his fingers in every pie, him and David Gully used to pick the England team.
Oh, okay.
The first time I came to Stoneleigh, I was a first-year apprentice, and I was introduced to David Gully in the evening at a barbecue. Richard invited me along, says, "I'll come along, bring a couple of friends." So we came to this barbecue, and it was like rabbit in the headlights. And so come on in, help yourself. And I was introduced to Mr. Gully, and Richard goes, "Oh, here you go, David, this is Stephen. This is my lad's new apprentice." I went, "Oh, hello, David." And he goes, "Oh, Mr. Gully to you." And I was like, "Oh, what am I getting myself into, this industry?"
Right. And
then I went to get a burger, and Doug Bradbury was flipping the burgers and cooking and serving them. He says, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Stephen Gowen's apprentice." And he says, "How many bones are there in a horse's foot?" And I said, 2 and a bit. And he goes, "That'll do, you can have a burger." So I did a pre-farrier course at Morton Mole, Warwickshire College. We were the first year ever to do that. And I was actually part of a 3-year apprenticeship trial group.
Oh, okay.
Which didn't continue. I was one of the first groups at Morton Mole, Warwickshire College, with the great Alan Bailey, the man who changed the industry dramatically from looking at below the knee to looking at the whole horse.
Mm-hmm.
One of my heroes. I qualified in 98. I then sat my associate in 2000, which I failed on the synthetic materials the first time.
Okay.
Went back 6 months later and passed my associate. Always wanted to do my fellowship, but my wife and I have 4 children.
That's a busy household.
Yeah. We're down to 7 horses of our own at the moment, and dogs, cats, and I'm a little bit of a hobby farmer. I have 20 odd cattle as well.
Oh, wow.
So fitting everything in was always difficult.
Yeah.
But my interest in horses and the racing, my father was very successful with horses that had tendon injuries. He used to buy horses, very well-bred horses that had a history of tendon injuries. and we had to feel the horses' legs every day.
Mm-hmm.
And my father went on to win every amateur race with these horses, apart from the Fox Hunter, which is the amateur Grand National at Aintree. So I've always been interested in that. And then I decided that I would do my dissertation on tendon injuries, superficial digital flexor tendon injuries. I then went down that route, did my research, and
what form did that take? What was the year?
Where I am based, I shoe a lot of event horses, hunters. I also do quite a lot of donkeys for some reason.
Oh, really?
I've got nearly 80 donkeys on my round.
Holy jeez. Okay.
And heavy horses, because of my boss was a big heavy horse farrier. I seem to have carried on doing a few of those. So I found with the event horses, certainly with the modern event horse, which is a warm blood, that they have asymmetric front feet, usually a high-low or a more boxy foot. And we are taught historically by owners and vets alike that long toes give horses tendon injuries. And I was discovering that these event horses would have the tendon injury, the classic breaking down of the mid-third of the superficial digital flexor tendon injury, a core lesion injury, would happen on the limb with the smaller foot.
Yep.
So I measured the front feet of 25 horses, all with diagnosed core lesion tendon injuries to the superficial digital flexor tendon. And I found that 5 of them had had tendon injuries in both limbs, so we had to discount them.
Okay.
1 horse's feet were measured to have a pair, so we discounted that one. Then 3 horses had the tendon injury on the limb with the bigger, flatter foot, and 16 had the tendon injury on the limb with the smaller, more upright-looking foot.
Now, more upright looking, you made a point of specifying that.
Yeah, because I measured all the feet after I trimmed them, and we would generally take the heels down a little bit more on an upright foot.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I try ever to make horses' feet a pair,
Right.
but bringing the bearing surface back to where I feel it's a suitable point, I often found that there's only between 2 and 3 different degrees difference in the feet. Even though you'd look at them and you'd say that's the upright foot, it's an optical illusion.
Right. Okay. Okay, so that the boxier foot, when you say 2 to 3 degrees different, would be 2 to 3 degrees different than the flat foot and not substantial then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it wasn't significant enough. I measured all the angles of the feet and we didn't use that data.
Okay.
The measurements I did take was the distance between the heels,
Right.
the widest part of the foot, and the classic toe to the lateral heel. And I added those numbers together to give me a single figure. It's quite a primitive study. When I look back at my dissertation now, I feel I perhaps would have used Metron or something, one of the computer programs that are out there now.
Did you have access to that even?
No, I mean, I'm not the most academic and not the most technical person. I try and keep everything very simple.
Right.
I really enjoyed it. The journey, I know everybody talks about the journey during the higher exams. That's what it's about.
Right.
I know there's a lot of talk at the moment with the industry saying, oh, the exams are now not worth anything. Well, Simon Curtis told me many years ago that the only people who appreciate what you've gone through to be a fellow is other fellows.
Right.
And I think in the industry, most of our customers don't know the level of exams. So
No.
personally, I think the exams are definitely worth it.
Clearly. So as somebody who's not academic, you must have been quite out of your comfort zone doing the dissertation.
Very much out of my comfort zone.
Okay.
The 4 of us grouped together and formed a study group. Mark Trussler, who's talking today.
Right.
Simon Moore, who should be coming if he's got back from the States examining.
Right.
Robert Shave.
Mm-hmm. I just saw him in the trade show hall there.
Yeah, he's the short little wannabe Viking looking chap. And myself, we had a Facebook page and we all sat our practical exam at the same time.
Okay.
And on the build up to that, we went with several people. John Nunn, he helped us. He was actually working towards his exam as well. We used to come to Stoneleigh and meet up here and use the forges and bring a load of dead legs and so on.
Okay.
Grant Moon, we spent some time with Darren Bazin, or various people and academic people as well to help with the dissertations.
Mm-hmm.
But we also spent time with Simon Curtis.
Yep. Well, there you go.
Simon, he's helped me a lot, certainly on that side of things.
Yeah. I've heard quite a few people who have given him their dissertation and it comes back with a lot of red ink on it, apparently. But
yeah, well, the funny thing is when Simon helped myself, the 4 of us were at different stages of our dissertations. And some people handed Simon a dissertation and he rip them a new backside. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I could write 5,000 words, or it was nearly 6,000 in the end mine, to then say, I need to rewrite it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote mine in stages, and I did my reading and my introduction and so on. I sent that to Simon, and he rang me and he said, before you open it, this has got lots of red on it, but did you write it? I'm like, yeah, I did. He goes, did you have help writing it? No. And he says, it's really good. He says, the things I've changed are the way you've referenced things. And I've just changed little things. He says, but no, it looks bad when you open it because I've changed a lot. But he said, it's really good. And I'm like,
oh, man. That's probably one of the best compliments ever.
Yeah, out of the four of us, I think I was the one who got away lightly with the help from Simon and the feedback from him. Simon organised talk at Rossdale's, the big vets practice in just outside of Newmarket. I think there was 8 or 9 of us who potentially wanted to do our fellowship, all gave a lecture to other farriers. And it was just an experience. And I hadn't done my research, but I had my ideas. So I did my lecture on that subject of the tendon injuries. And there was 2 lecturers there. One was Dr. Alison Northrop, who is a contributing author on like the FEI white paper on surfaces and things like that. She's a research doctor. And she approached me about my subject. And she says, I think this is fantastic. If you need any help, please get in touch. And she goes, if you need statistics are her thing. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, here we go.
Because statistics are, yeah.
If you're going to get academic, there's the far end of the spectrum, right?
Yeah. So I was very fortunate that she helped me and did all my statistics. And the fact that somebody else was as interested in the subject as I was quite...
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Because it seems like such a thing that you wouldn't have the shared interest and that somebody be willing to help you with it too, right?
Yeah. And yeah, the rest is history. I actually failed my fellowship, the communication side, the first time.
Now, the communication side being...
what people call the theory side.
Oh, okay.
So my dissertation passed and my lecture on my topic was okay. That passed, but my surprise lecture, a few things went wrong setting up the computer to give my talk.
Oh, shoot.
And the nerves got the better of me. And anybody who knows me to think that I failed a talking aspect of an exam, they don't believe me. But I knew I wasn't good enough. And when you get to that level, I actually knew my examiners because I was made an examiner before I was a fellow. I was invited in to be a worshipful company examiner when I was an associate, with the condition that I took my fellowship within so many years.
Okay.
Which I did. The examiners actually contacted me and said, look, Stephen, you've got this. You just went to pieces. I said, I know. And I went back 6 months later and redid that, and that was fine. The annoying thing was the surprise subject they gave me was breakover, which I am fairly passionate about. Okay. I think it's a bit of an obsession in the industry that people get hung up on.
Yeah.
And I actually, in the hour-long time frame where you have to prepare the surprise lecture, I sat there listening to Mike Miller's talk on has gait analysis, sabotage, something like that, yeah, which is all about breakover, which I think is a great thing on YouTube to listen to. And I was really confident, but when I got in the room, boom.
The IT difficulties kind of
just
cause
you don't need a lot to go wrong.
Right. And you're in a pretty high pressure situation too.
That is a seriously hard thing to do. A 20-minute lecture on anything they decide.
Yeah. And so was it a different topic the next time you went in?
Yeah. And being an examiner myself, I've been an examiner since 2010. I started doing my probationary. I've examined higher exams, and I have been the person that's actually given people that topic. And I'm not saying you make it really hard. You don't want to give them a topic that they're going to have a pre-made lecture. The whole idea is that you get an understanding of their depth of knowledge and how they can talk and communicate about something within the industry. So you don't just say, oh, can you give us a talk on laminitis? Because I had Robert Shaver and myself got together and we prepared 45 lectures, I think it was.
Really?
So he did the front end, I did the back end. We all used the same font. We all used the same terminology. Then we got together and combined those two and improved on them. So, yeah, same background and so on. So we could drag one screen over to another and so on. So, and then I also had other people's lectures because a lot of people are out there to help.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to help when people want to do better. But when they want to better themselves generally, there's so many people are prepared to
step in and help you do that.
Which is great.
Yeah. So there were a couple of things there from what you just said. One of them being, so what is your take on breakover? You should see the look on his face right now.
Okay. People are obsessed with shortening breakover. Obviously, with my tendon injuries, people say, oh, keep the toe short, keep the toe short. Vets are saying shorten toes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a long toe is defined. The term long toe is just an opinion.
Right.
If you Google it, you can have, it doesn't work on a podcast, but you can have something at a certain length at that angle.
Right.
It's an upright foot. And then you can have something at that angle and it's a long toe. But it actually hasn't changed length.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the depth of heel. It's the relation between the heel and the toe. So that's the first thing. The term long toe, I think, is a bad term because it's opinion.
It's so vague, yeah.
People bring the breakover back. I rarely put a shoe on without some form of ease breakover. I think the only shoes I put on where I don't ease the breakover in one form or another is my heavy horses, the Suffolks. And to be honest, they're not doing any fast work and they wear that bit. I think they need that purchase at the toe.
Mm-hmm.
I think quarter clips and so on have been used incorrectly for a long period of time, the way that they're fitted, and people are trying to shorten the toes. I find if you have a horse with a weak foot, generally the heels are the weak area. If you then don't use the toe, which is the strongest part of the foot, you're then not using the best part of the foot. You're increasing the force that's applied to the weak areas.
Okay.
So if you chopped a leg off a table, you've increased the force on the other three legs by just over 8%.
Mm-hmm.
So by bringing the breakover too far back, which I feel a lot of people do, you don't actually help the horse. It gets worse.
Because now there's more pressure on the heels because they're taking more of the load.
I'm not saying a long toe is a good thing, but if you have a weak area of a horse's foot, you add material. You don't reduce material. So if you have a horse with a weak heels, it's usually got a compromised hoof capsule already.
Mm-hmm.
And people will tend to rasp the toe back to make them look good. But actually, once you do that, you get more spread of the horse's foot under load.
Right, because the wall is weaker.
Totally. You get more flattening of the sole. And in turn, you get more derotation of the pedal bone.
Right.
Which in turn increases the force on the deep digital flexor. And I think people don't realise that decreasing the force on the deep digital flexor is great. Certainly like dressage horses and so on working on a surface. But sports horses generally, over 90% of them will break down on the superficial. The superficial doesn't even go into the foot. It attaches onto the back of P3 and P2. Sorry, P1 and P2. And by taking the force off one structure, you're adding it to another.
Right, yeah. And there's always a trade-off.
Yeah. I think the great term on one of Danny's podcasts, Wayne Priest said, robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right, yep.
And I think that we've gone a bit too far down that route with the breakover.
And you think that's why we're seeing more injuries to the other?
Well, I wear the soles of my boots where the ball of my foot is and the outside heel. Now, we are trimming horses and shoeing horses for simulated wear. So when I buy a new pair of boots, I don't take them to the grinder and take that outside of my heel down and that ball of my foot to suit the last pair of shoes I had. Those areas are wearing because they are being used more. That's not always the case. If you've got a side bone horse and it's caning the outside of the shoe, I agree with reducing the material there to help with that. But I think with toes, I think the horses are wearing it because they're
using it.
We have a bit of a fashion. I'm a hypocrite here because I put solid-toed Equilibrium Air mustard shoes on horses and they have a solid toe. And I think a horse needs its toe, even though they're rear-wheel drive at stages. I hunt a lot, and if I'm jumping a ditch, my horse will have one front foot placed on the far bank of the ditch at one time, pulling itself along.
Right.
So they are four-wheel drive at times. Now, by not having any traction in that area of the shoe, I feel that can slip. A superficial digital flexor tendon injury is a repetitive strain injury. It always happens at the end of the race or end of an event, and it's the build-up of heat. A deep digital flexor tendon injury, for me, is usually a one-off instance. I don't think we can ever prove this, but it must be under full strain. The deep digital flexor would be under full strain.
For it to snap.
When it's going to be injured.
Mm-hmm.
And that point is when the heels start to come off the ground at the start of breakover. So if there's something happens at that point, when the heels come off the ground to make the deep distal flexor tendon injury. Now, the two things that spring to my mind are the horse's foot moving, either slipping or the surface, the substrate is moving.
Giving way.
And the horse has to give an extra, more effort to actually achieve what it's trying to achieve. Or that shoe can be pulled off and the horse then has to pull harder. So I feel that the deep distal flexor tendon injuries happen at that stage.
Okay. So you don't think that they can be a degenerative thing?
I think they can be, but we're never going to know, are we? That's the problem.
Right.
I just think it has to be at that point when they are injured. And it tends to be horses on a softer surface. Or one of my colleagues who I was on the phone to on the way here, he's had a horse that repeatedly loses shoes on a boxy foot. It's turned out and that's gone lame and that has a deep distal flexor. And I've got lots of examples of when it happens, which is why I've come to this, my opinion.
Right. Yeah. And for all of us, because we don't have a solid scientific paper telling us each aspect of what could possibly happen, all we have are our experiences.
Totally.
And what we find from them. Yeah.
I mean, I am very horsey.
Oh, clearly.
I love horses. My wife was an eventer. I had one of my own horses go around Burley, 4-star as it was back in the day. I just love horses. I am the farrier at Burley, and I had Tiffany on the exchange happen to come and stay with me the week I was at Burley.
Oh, yes, I did hear about that on Danny's podcast. Yeah.
I think she had a pretty good time.
No kidding.
It's my favourite week of the year.
Is it?
Favourite week of the year. I just get to see old friends. I see these horses and what they're expected to do. Yeah, I just love horses.
Mm-hmm. So you said you still do put some breakover.
I will close the fullering on all my concave shoes. I won't close it fully. The same on a hind foot. I will safe them, if you like, safe the toes. Every concave shoe I have, and the other ones I use on the horses that are working on a surface on my equilibrium airs that have that rolled toe already.
Okay. And you feel like that's enough that you're not having issues in that footing, but you're also not taking away so much of their drive. It's like a compromise.
I think people are obsessed with the front half of the foot.
Yeah.
Peak load on a horse's limb is when the fetlock's at its lowest point, which is mid stance, fetlock's down, the limb's pretty much vertical. I think where the toe is not as important as where the bearing point of the foot finishes and where the shoe finishes. We give a horse support out the back. We are told that a fishtail shoe stops a horse's fetlock from hitting the ground when it's properly the fetlocks come down, the tendons have catastrophically failed.
Right.
And I would agree that shoeing with length supports that.
Right.
And I think we're shoeing horses now, not just feet. Unfortunately, the way that the horses are kept, they're turned out a lot more with shoes on than they ever used to be when I started my apprenticeship 30 years ago. We're restricted in how we can shoe them.
And how much length you can have?
I think it's Martin Deacon taught me. He's been quite a big influence for me over the years. He said, when you're shoeing a horse, you're trying to put a platform on the bottom of the limb that a horse can land, load, support, and push off from. And I think that's a really good, simple way of looking at what we're trying to achieve when we put a shoe on a horse or trimming a horse.
And it's something I've thought a lot of, and I'm sure it's worldwide because there does seem to be a shortage of people even available to work on horse farms. So a lot of horses that never used to have an issue, I find, will pull shoes out in the paddock because nobody's bringing them in time or monitoring them when they're out there. So I've had to shoe with less length in the fronts, more typically. Now, for something like eventing, where you also have the risk on cross country of them pulling shoes, how do you mitigate that?
One of my longest customers is a chap called Angus Smales, and him and I have a great relationship. We just give each other grief all the time, pretty much. We drink together. We used to go hunting together. We used to shoot together and all sorts. But he's got a young family now, so he's not allowed.
Okay.
So he used to whip into the Fernie hunt. A whipper in is a hunt servant. They help with the hounds, and his horses were shod hunter style.
Right.
When he was hunting, because not having a shoe on the end of the foot, that is not working.
Right.
If hounds are running and they have to gallop down the road, you need a shoe on.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a very good, natural, balanced rider. When he started eventing, everything was shod with width and length. And I were probably in like 18 years or however long I've been shoeing for him, I've probably only lost a dozen shoes eventing. Usually if he lost a shoe, it would be in the field because he's a balanced rider and horses are going. So I don't have problems with most of my customers. I think customers lose shoes. We've got certain people that don't even hunt and I shoe them hunter style because I know.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, he'll be back to fix a shoe.
Yeah. So every horse is different. Every owner's different. Just ask yourself why. I'm a big person to question absolutely everything. If you told me something, I'd think, okay. And I'd go away, think about it. I'd try it and I'd question why. Usually the simple answer's the correct one.
Yeah. Now, for giving that support, what are the guidelines that you're using? Are you using the 60-40 or 50-50 rule on the widest part of the foot, or?
Ideally, you would want your 60-40 doesn't really happen, does it? Let's face it.
Yeah.
If you can be 50-50 when you come back to shoe a horse, that's great. Every horse is different.
I feel like even that sometimes is a struggle.
Yeah, definitely. And I find actually the more upright, boxy looking the foot is, the harder to get those proportions are.
Mm-hmm.
You often find that the distance from the apex of the frog to the breakover point, if you like, the most dorsal point of the toe, is longer on an upright foot than it is on a flat foot.
Yep.
If I was going to do my study again, that is something I would look at as well.
Right. I wonder how many people just wrote that down. They're like, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah. The dissertation, actually, I get people ring me all the time. They want to do a study. Most of the studies are disproving things that we've been teaching for the best part of 100 years.
Right.
Simon Moore, his study about toe thickness, we were told it was 1.5 times or the thickness of the toe compared to the quarters. So he cut through loads of morbid specimens an inch down from the coronary band and measured the thickness of the wall, and different breeds were different. We're told that there's 400 laminal leads or so on. Has anybody else counted them? Have we counted them on different breeds? You know, there's lots of things out there. Lots of things are being disproved.
Right.
I think if anybody doing their fellowship, it's got to be something you're passionate about because it absorbs so much of your life. You don't want to do it on something you're not interested in.
No. Right.
And disproving things, or not even disproving, you don't have to disprove things. Your thoughts, you could actually do a study and find out that it's not wrong.
Right.
Or what you was expecting to find was not there.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
You're still learning something.
Yeah, and you can still hand that in. You say, I was expecting that if I put graduated shoes on 10 horses and blah, 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 it was going to have this effect, and actually it didn't.
Right.
Then so be it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be something you're interested in. And I think with the technology now, it's limitless, absolutely limitless what we can do.
Yeah, there are a lot of options out there now. Now back to, what do you use as is it just because there's so many variables to it?
I look at the center of the foot. I think the hardest thing to teach people when foot dressing,
mm-hmm.
I'm a big advocate in watching horses move and also the T-square. I'm a big believer in that. Martin Deacon transformed my life. I had a horse called Fritz that I shod with my boss. It was a stallion, a warm blood stallion, a proper staple shaped foot. One of my greatest customers. She was my first customer when I went on my own. And my boss shot it at this dressage yard, and we had to shoot it hunter style, and we still lost shoes. I went on a foot balance course, and I had Mac Head, Howard Cooper, God bless him, Sandy Beveridge, Martin Deacon, and they taught me about watching this horses move, landing, loading, and so on. And we had toe-in horses, and we were chopping the outside down to get them to land level, which made them look even more toe-in, and the horses were moving better. We had these horses that were definitely benefiting from being shod to the T-square. Not far from here, we had Spud Allison's father, Tom, who died many years ago. Great man. I was actually the farrier who's trying to ring me now.
Oh.
We did BSPS show, which was 5 days of pony showing. And Tom used to have ponies. And I was going through this journey of using the T-square, which was making horses stand a bit toe in and so on. And Tom came along and said to us, he goes, right, boys, he said, got some Guinness. Come on, let's have a drink. And we sat there at the back of the van. And he said, I've got some advice for you. You want to make all these show ponies a little bit toe in. Don't put a clip on them. Make them toe in. He says it opens them up in the shoulder and they'll move a lot better. And he's doing it through experience.
Right, yeah.
I was taught to do it by the T-square with Mac and Martin and so on. And that we were doing it because we were shooting to the T-square and trying to get level footfall. And we were getting results. Tom was getting results. He actually won. His pony went on to win at Wembley at Horse of the Year show that year. Tom's horse did. So it's amazing how it's not new, but people don't seem to look for the answers. We're dictated to by customers that our horses need to stand square. They need to look right. They need to look like this. The toes need to be short. And I don't think as farriers we defend ourselves and explain ourselves well enough. The T-square for me is my first line when I'm trimming a foot and watching a horse move, because a horse will actually move its foot to land level.
Right.
It'll move it laterally or medially to try and achieve level footfall.
Mm-hmm.
Then I will take the shoe off and assess where I feel the heels need to be. I have a lot of feet I would only chop heels down on. And it was very different to how I was taught. Very different. We would leave every bit of heel that was strong on a horse's foot, no matter how far forward that was.
Right.
There's no way of teaching this. This is an experience. It's the hardest thing to get. But getting the heels and the bearing surface back to the correct point, for me, is the most important thing. Getting the bearing point to where it should be, for me, is the next thing. And then the toe. I believe when dressing toes, the hoof wall should be ideally the same thickness from the quarter around the toe to the other quarter. I don't think we should be putting shapes into feet that aren't there. You see on Facebook, we see a lot of bold shoes. Yeah. There's all this stuff going on with the Shire horse shoeing in the UK at the moment that I've been involved with, assessing feet, and they were putting square shoes on horses' feet. They're actually pointy.
Mm-hmm.
I think the basics of, like you say, getting more behind where we imagine the centre of the foot to be, whether you use the centre of articulation or the centre of rotation or ducket stop, whatever. Personally, I don't map feet, but I think we all do subconsciously. Yeah. You look at a foot and think, oh, we need to bring the bearing surface back, need to get the toe back, however.
Mm-hmm.
I think every horse is different, and certainly without having horses in front of us and visual aids on a podcast,
unfortunately,
it's hard to,
yeah.
Basic shoeing for me all the time. I hardly put any quarter clips on, except hind feet. I aim for symmetry. If a horse's foot is not symmetrical, it's not bearing weight evenly. And for me, that's 4 possible reasons, usually a combination of more than one. Farrier, conformation, management, whether a horse is going too long between shoeing cycles, and avoidance of pain. Now, as a farrier, it's up to us to establish where or what of those is affecting that horse's foot. But if a horse's foot is not symmetrical, it's telling you it's not bearing weight evenly.
Right.
And trying to place a platform on the bottom of that foot that helps it, either makes it land and load better or supports it by putting a lateral extension on a toe-in horse or medial width on a contracted inside, trying to achieve that symmetry without forcing it into it, just encouraging with footfall and loading. That's what I'm looking for. Symmetry, level landing, equal loading. When Tiffany was with me, one thing I think she took away from being with me is horse's foot hits the ground, that's landing. As the horse's body weight passes over that limb, that's loading of that limb.
Mm-hmm.
As the fetlock descends to the lowest point, that's peak loading. Equal loading is the fetlock descending equally between the bulbs of the heels. Unequal loading is the fetlock descending over one heel more than the other. And that is what we need to be looking at as an industry, because we don't.
Yeah, it's true. Just back to your discussion about symmetry, are you looking for perfect symmetry and shape on either side? Because I know that even from reading Simon Curtis's book, where he talks about how a foal's foot is symmetrical when it's born, and then as it develops, it starts to develop that more upright and tighter curve on the medial side and a broader lateral.
I think it's everything within reason.
No.
There's a lot of horses you're never going to get a symmetrical shoe on, let alone trim them to a symmetrical shape. But it's, why is it asymmetric in the first place? And again, with asymmetric pairs of feet, with a high-low, upright, flat foot, why is it like that?
Mm-hmm.
So my old hunter, anybody who follows me on Facebook would have seen Jimmy Manhole was a bit of a legend. He's called Jimmy Manhole because he fell down a hole when he was about 8 and chopped into his hock.
Oh my gosh.
And had quite extensive rehab. He was tied up in cross ties for best part of 6 months, so he couldn't lie down. And bit of a legend of a horse. He was 27 when I retired him from hunting. I learned a lot from him. He probably had 2 upright feet, but one was more upright than the other. Quite unusual because he was a predominantly blood horse. The muscle grouping on that horse was very different from one side to the other. When I sat on that horse, his muscle mass was further forward on the side with the upright foot in front of his shoulder. If you look down, it was really obvious. I was never going to get that symmetrical. You're never going to get the muscles symmetrical. You and I, swinging a hammer, we don't have symmetrical. It doesn't mean we can't work. It doesn't mean we're lame.
Right.
Lameness is an asymmetry in gait caused by avoidance of pain.
Right.
That's how I describe it. Now, you can have asymmetry in gait, but it doesn't always mean a horse is in pain. So if a horse has a high-low, those limbs move very differently.
Yeah.
The flatter foot tends to move straighter and lower, more of a daisy cutting, and the upright foot will usually wing in or wing out and certainly land. They tend to land a lot heavier laterally. You're never going to change that, but you can help it.
Right.
I'm not saying you have to put symmetrical shoes on, but you have to question why it's not symmetrical.
I caught the tail end of Simon Moore's talk in the US at the summit, and he was talking about, you guys call them stabilizers, we call them training wheels on a bike.
Yes.
And he had said, like, having your quarters in line with each other, he felt that was really important. In the symmetry, is that something that you're aiming for, is having those in line?
Definitely, so especially on hind feet. In front feet, if you have a boxy foot, you would normally have what I would call a vertical axis rotation. So you stand in front of the horse and it looks quite square, but actually you hang the limb forward from the knee and you look down it and the foot rotates in massively, and it'll be fetlock varus. And you often have an offset knee, and then they're tied in the elbow, and the knee points out to 11 o'clock. The toe points over to 1 o'clock. But actually, when the horse is stood there, they look square. I often find that you have a late outside heel quarter and the medial side quarter is further forward. You'll often find that those quarters are parallel with the direction of travel if you do a line across them.
Right.
Now, the other thing, if you get that horse's foot landing level, you'll often find that your outside heel is a lot further back than your medial heel. Your lateral heel is further back. And if you do a line across those, when you're holding the foot, as if you're eye lining for balance or for level, the back of the heels will often they'll be horizontal. In hind feet, yes. Front feet, ideally, but you're never going to get a horse with a vertical axis rotation, as I call them, to have a symmetrical foot.
Right. Yeah.
So what I would often tend to do, if you trim it, how I've said, to land level, you end up then, sometimes if you rotate your shoe round laterally, so the centre of the toe is in the centre of the breakover, so that your toe clip is in the centre of the breakover, you'll often find that you're then parallel with your heels. So the horse is landing, the two heels are landing together, and the breakover is all square, and the horses will move straighter. They'll certainly appear to move straighter, as opposed to putting the clip where the centre of the frog is. I mean, this is a really hard thing to be talking about.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard to show when you've got horses in front of you.
Right. And why do you not use the quarter clips? Is it because of the cheating of the toe?
Medial lateral balance for me is very important, more so than anterior posterior. If you look at every bone in the lower limb of the horse, they're only designed to go in one direction.
That's right, yeah.
A horse can cope with a long toe, because when a horse his heels are about to come off the ground, that is a broken pack hoof pass and access. Mm-hmm. That is normal.
Right. Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying a long toe is good, but they can cope. They cannot cope with unlevel landing, certainly not on the hard surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I was examining Scottish farrier, and he came up with a term. This is for his fellowship. He had a horse there that had quarter clips on it, and he said, this horse is side clip sick. And I thought that was a really good term. A horse's foot, as I said earlier, the upright foot often isn't too much different angle from the flat foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go and put quarter clips on it to try and make it bring the toe back, or for whatever reasons keep the toe short. That foot can only go in one direction. It can only go forward. The horse with quarter clips or side clips struggles to spread, which sometimes that can be a good thing if you're trying to tighten a horse's foot up. But we see a lot of people putting quarter clips on narrow, long feet. And I think they only go one way. I also think when you're using a concave shoe, if you have a quarter clip on it, you either have to cut your clips in quite a lot and therefore your nails are not in the white line.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up nailing up in the walls and you end up with weak feet. I used loads of quarter clips, certainly in the eventing world. When I first moved to Rutland, most of the front shoes I put on were quarter clips. I used all the natural balance shoes when Gene Ovenchek brought them out. I jumped on that bandwagon. I've tried all these things and I'm actually shoeing horses more now with a toe clip in front, quarter clips behind, and nothing flash. It's all in the foot trim.
So I wanted to ask, as an examiner, is there some advice that you would have for candidates that are going into their exams, especially the higher level ones, that you have seen multiple times that they've done wrong, or just any hints or tips for people who are about to get into that situation and put themselves in that spot?
Yeah, definitely. Loads of hints and tips.
Okay.
I don't think people realise that it's not a competition. It's an animal welfare thing.
Right.
And it's all about getting the basics right. The penny clicked with me several years ago. I went down the competition route. I was doing every competition I could and we were shining things up and this, that and the other and trying to make everything look good and pretty. And I did quite well in the competition, and there was the judge was a chap called Steve Wright.
Okay.
And I always go and ask where I could have improved, where I went wrong. And he said, yeah, your heels are forged. Your nails are in the front half of the shoe. Your foot was flat. You got a strong clip, and it fits. And I came away from there thinking, well, I didn't learn anything from that. And then half hour into the drive home, I ring my good friend Robert, and I told him what he said. And I felt I'd been missing the point. And it all is about the basics.
Right.
And we are there to make that horse go better. For me, stick to the basics, nail hole fit. I mean, as an apprentice in this country, you've been training for 4 years. If you can't put a hole in a piece of steel that a nail hole fits into, then you don't deserve to qualify.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
It is that simple. Getting the basics right, nails fitting, nails in the white line, front half of the foot, get the foot level. It is really basic. And I think people get too hung up on things, certain aspects. If, you know, you're there to either put a bar shoe on, a lateral extension bar shoe, or whatever you choose to do, make sure you achieve what you set out to do.
Right.
Do that rather than file it up and make it shiny.
Right.
That's my advice. So, don't get me wrong, showcase your work. If you have time to file it up,
Mm-hmm.
showcase your work and be proud of your work.
But don't make that the focus of.
Don't make that the focus. Funnily enough, the Royal Show that was here many years ago, I stayed behind to look at all the shoes. And Robin May was the judge, and he had written on every label things that were wrong. And I sat down with Dave Smith. He was a bit of a hero of mine, and we were looking at these shoes and we were reading the comments. And it was a shame that nobody else went and picked their shoes up because all the comments were correct. I remember picking up Jim Blurton's shoe and I said, oh my God, that didn't get a very good score. Why is that? And you read the comments and there was heel nails that were particularly far back. There's an excessive number of heel nails, and the heel nails were pitched out and his were pitched normally, and things like just attention to detail. And Robin had made a lot of effort to comment on all these things, but the shoes at first glance looked amazing.
Right.
But not functional.
Right.
So that would be my advice. Stick to the basics and get them right.
Okay. That makes sense. With the competition route, you've taken on a lot. Like, you're clearly busy with family. And then as an examiner, when did you finally decide that, okay, I don't have time for certain things?
I haven't decided that yet.
You're still doing it all?
Yeah, I don't do so many competitions.
Okay.
I try and do the Suffolk show every year. Since COVID, it's been a bit harder. I help organise the Rutland show. Yeah, it's mainly the Suffolk's the one that I go to each year. It's the one I've not won in East Anglia as well. It's the one that I've won the pairs a couple of times, and I won the Master Apprentice with a Friends Apprentice this year.
Okay.
But I've not actually won the individual. I've been second countless times. So I think I've got to keep going.
Right, yeah.
Hope one day that I get a lucky run.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover before we do the short answer questions?
I think that everybody's very downbeat about the industry in the UK at the moment. I just wish people would, it's going to be fine. You know, it will get better. Stop putting it down. Let's get together and we're going to work this out.
Right.
And we'll be better for it. We'll be stronger. And hopefully we'll start charging proper money like you do over in Canada and the States.
Right. Yeah. What do you think will have to change for people to be able to do that? Is it just perception?
It's my opinion that the state of the farrier industry in this country is where it is because of the horse owner.
Okay.
People say that the horse owner gets the farrier they deserve. Now, a lot of the horses I do would wear the shoes out. Some of my hunt horses would wear 7/8, 7/16 hind shoes out in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. The horses I do are working. Even those horses are not wearing their shoes anywhere near as much because the demands on those horses are far less. And I think there's more and more people actually don't need shoes. I refit more and more shoes, and which is great. Horses just aren't doing the work. And I think as a result, they don't need the level of farrier they deserve. I think people get a farrier in who's turns up on time, is nice to their horse, smiles and doesn't charge a lot and keep shoes on. So farriers are often judged on their ability to keep a shoe on and how much they charge. And I think more and more people are in that category. So more and more farriers are accommodating that clientele. So I believe that's why the standard in this country is not as good as it was.
Okay.
As an examiner, in the 11, 12 years I've been doing that, 13 years, the standard that we require in the exam hasn't changed. The hoops we jump through to make sure that we are all singing from the same song sheet is great. And we have to do equality and diversity online courses and things like that. There's a lot of things we do outside that people won't see as an examiner. And I can examine with any of the examiners and we wouldn't shoe horses the same way, but we are all agreed
on the standard because it's animal welfare. There's things we would do differently. Obviously, forge a heel differently or so on, or bigger, smaller shoes and that. But actually, the animal welfare side of it, I think the Westwood Company, the examiners we have there now are fantastic. We are failing more people, I find, than we ever failed. I remember the first person I failed, and I think there was 27 people in that group, and we failed one. And we go to exams now, and sometimes you could be failing 50%. Really?
And what we require from them hasn't changed. The apprentices don't make the shoes like they used to. It's not cost effective really to have an apprentice unless you're running a big business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, business models don't really support training apprentices to the level that perhaps they were trained years ago. So I think that's a bit of a shame where we're at the moment. I can see it going to a full-time college course. I don't want it to do that. I can see it going fitting keg shoes, as you would say, which I don't want to see that. But we've got to satisfy the government's needs and we've got to satisfy the horse owners' needs. And yeah, it's a really tricky situation. But at the end of the day, it's a great industry. Fantastic. I love the job.
And it must be disappointing to see that standard drop.
Don't get me wrong. I think there's a bigger divide. There's some amazing work out there as well.
Yeah, right.
Amazing work. I don't want you to think across the board.
Right.
There seems to be getting a bigger divide. Some people run with it, and I see shoes on a board, and I think, God, I wish I made that.
Mm-hmm.
Specimen shoes. So yeah, it's not everybody. Yeah.
It's funny because in North America, I think we need to raise ours and really encourage the voluntary certifications and stuff like that. So it's interesting to see and hear from the other side of it when you have that system in place, but things have changed and the owners have changed and
the demands of the horse. In fact, the type of horse we're dealing with, the traditional pictures you see in books about conformation are sort of incorrect with a lot of the horses we see now. Certainly with the influx of warm bloods we have in this country, conformation of those horses is very different to what you see in the books written in 1800s.
Right. Yeah.
Funnily enough, you talk about the standards here. At Burley, the horse that won Best Shod was shod by Russell Deering, who is an English farrier. He was an apprentice same time as one of my lads, so I know Russell. And he moved out there, I think, to work. And Jenny Brannigan, the event rider, her horse won Best Shod. So it's the first American horse to win Best Shod in the UK, I believe. And it was won with an English farrier. And she said what she's learnt since she's had the English farrier over there has been unbelievable. She says the training that you guys undertake, she was so impressed with it. It was really interesting talking to her and how she feels her horses are going better since she's had Russell shoeing her horses. So that's quite quite interesting. And people think we should deregulate in this country, which I don't think is the way forward.
No, I do not think so either. This is the Stratum Tectorium. Short answer questions brought to you by Out West Design and Fabrication. Your choice for farrier rigs. Do you have a favorite book?
Sniper 1 by Sergeant Dan Mills.
Okay.
The last book that I really couldn't put down, apart from Stevie Fisher's book as well, which I think people have mentioned.
Yes.
Blinking Hell. Yeah, so that's another one. I actually nearly cried in the penultimate chapter in that book where he was quite humble. I thought that was a really good book.
That's one where he has the locked-in syndrome, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good book. But yeah, Sniper 1 by Sergeant Dan Mills was the last book. I'm not a big reader, to be honest. I read more articles than I do books.
Okay.
But with having 8 children in my house at the moment, I fall asleep as soon as I start reading. That's the problem.
Right. Favorite brand of nails?
Mustard. Slims.
What shoe sizes or lengths would you usually have to cut and keep the most stock of?
I probably use a 13-inch hind, which I suppose is like a 2 Stromy or 5 Vulcan shoe. That would be the shoes I order most, I believe. But I use everything from... I make anything that's under 11 inches or 11 inches and under. So all my pony shoes I make.
Oh, okay.
And anything over 15 inches I make as well. All my heavy horse shoes I make. And we've been struggling to get some of the bigger shoes at the moment. So I seem to be making a lot more. But I suppose my favourite shoe would be a 9-inch 3/8 Billy Crothers handmade shoe, as they call it. But unfortunately, he stopped making them.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the one I would use. That in front and a 13-inch hind, 13.5-inch front and 13-inch hind, I would say.
Okay. And now, do you make the shoes at the horse or do you build them at home?
I try to make them at home, but it never works.
Yeah.
I work with lad Sam. He's my last apprentice. He's been with me over 9 years now. Okay. He passed his associate 2-3 years ago now, and he's my right-hand man. He's the one that keeps me going and questions me and so on. But if we have a single horse, I get under the horse, trim the feet, fit the shoes, and one of us will sometimes start to make shoes for horses whilst we're at the anvil. And then we have a system that if he's halfway through making a shoe, I will take over and he nails and clench his and so on. So we often try to have shoes made up before we get to the horse, but they're often done out the back of the van.
Gotcha. Just the way it plays out. Favorite make of rasp?
Green tangs up until the rain about a month ago. I've just gone on to my first blue tang last week, I think it was.
Okay. Yep. Do you have a dream farrier rig?
Yeah, I quite like... I've got a Hilux at the moment with a purpose-built back on it. It's not quite how I wanted it workmanship-wise. I would definitely go with that again, but I would design it a bit differently. I was hoping that my anvil wouldn't have to lift it in and out because I'm 47 years old. I thought another 3 or 4 vehicles and I'll be done shoeing.
Right, yeah.
And the back is, I can transfer it from one to another.
Okay, yeah.
But I've ended up having to lift my anvil in and out of a van that's even higher.
Right.
Probably done wonders for my core. I don't know.
Favorite rounding hammer?
Hammer's a weird one with me. I'm actually using a Flashman hammer. You ever heard of them?
No.
Danny Bennett made me a hammer that I've been using recently.
Oh, okay.
He made it a few years back for me, and he's got his lightning flash on the side.
Really?
Yeah, so I use that every day. But actually forging at the moment, I'm using the lad who works for me's hammer, which is a beanie.
Okay.
I'm actually in the market for buying myself a forging hammer today.
Okay.
Well, everyday shoeing and shoemaking, I don't want something that I have to grip too tight. I don't want it too long in the head because otherwise you have to grip it tighter and then you lose the flexibility in your wrist and your elbow. I think you should be holding a hammer a bit like you hold a nail-in-on hammer. Yeah. So if you have a too flat a face as well, if you're tired, if you're on your 7th set and comes down, I find that you have to concentrate a bit more. Where if you have a slightly domed face, I have got one, the Grant Moon, they call it the Fitter, which again is a slightly bigger face, which is a little bit domed, but it doesn't fatigue when you're using it all day.
Okay. I've never thought of that way. I always wondered why they had the more domed faces.
Yuri Hofi, the Israeli blacksmith, came over and did a talk here at Stoneleigh many years ago. And he talked about how to hold a hammer and the mechanics of holding a hammer. And if you don't use your thumb, if you grip tight like it's a tennis racket, then you lose all the flexibility in your wrist. It's all from your shoulder.
Right.
And he says you should be using every joint. If you watch somebody like Stephen Bean, he's reaching up here and every joint's bending. He's on his toes and so on, rather than looking like an old dwarf blacksmith with a big long beard, just working from the shoulder. He said you can train the tendons in your hand for your fingers to nearly touch the back of your arm if you pull your fingers back like so. Whereas this way, you're only ever going to have that much movement. So he gets you to hold a hammer.
Oh, really? So you're in the market today. Favorite type of bar stock to work with?
7838. Concave.
Favorite pastime after work?
Hunting.
All right, said that. What's the next thing on your bucket list?
I'd like to go to Cincinnati, actually.
Oh, okay.
To the summit. I fancy doing that. But outside of work, I'd like to do some fly fishing. I'd like more time to do fly fishing.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that sounds like that'll be the hardest part of it. What's your favorite brand of machine-made shoe?
Billy Crothers Handmaids.
It's a pretty common answer here. Ideal number of horses to shoe all around in one day if you did it on your own?
I don't think it's about the numbers. I think it's how much you take. I'd like to say £500 worth of shoeing a day. So if I'm £100 a set, 5 basic sets, or if I'm doing 3 sets, some of them with pads, or if I'm doing trims as well, I think, yeah, if they're just bog standard shoes, if you're putting stud holes in, 4 sets with double stud holes, road pin, I think it's about how much money you're taking as opposed to the number. I think we all get hung, I did 10 sets today.
Yeah, I've heard of some people who do it on a point system. A trim is worth so many points. And
3 trims is a set.
Right.
And a heavy horse is 2 sets. We aim to do, Sam and I, between 40 and sometimes up to 70 horses in a week. We're not as busy as we used to be, and every horse you don't shoe is better for your body. So as I get older and more grumpy, I've probably forced a few customers away. But I'm really bothered, as you can tell.
Yeah, you look really stressed about it. Favorite anvil?
The Swanee in my van. I've had it since I set up. Owes me nothing. I would like a Scott anvil with a tapered back.
You're going to have to come to the summit. Pick one up.
I've been looking at them. I've seen them, and I'd like to have a play on one. But no, my Swanee anvil is great, and I've got a really old Brooks anvil in my shed at home.
Okay.
Not a wide face, but for some reason I just like it. 2,500 weight as well. That's my shop anvil. But I've got 5 or 6 anvils from when I had like 3 apprentices.
Right.
But the big Brooks, but the Swanee owes me nothing. She's tired. I spent 3 hours with hard facing rods the other day.
Oh, did you?
I probably spent 20 minutes welding it and 3 hours grinding it.
Right. Yeah.
And just to
get some sharp edges again.
Yeah. But she's 25 years old and doesn't owe me a penny.
Yeah. Wow. Worth every penny. Favorite inspirational quote?
I did hear something recently where somebody said a good person is somebody who makes the right decision even though it's the hardest route to take, or words. I don't know who it was, but I thought that fits into a lot of things, I believe.
Yeah, no kidding. Do you have a farrier terrier?
I've got a spaniel at the moment, but I've always had terriers, really.
Oh, really? Okay.
Unfortunately, I lost my last one, a little Lakeland terrier called Lottie, and she actually went blind at the age of 5. She got glaucoma, so...
Oh, shoot.
But she was a bugger, to say the least. Yeah, she used to run off, and she liked chasing things, and she was good with people's pets and stuff, cats and things like that. But
it was just keeping track of her.
Going down holes, yeah. I may have had to dig her out a few times.
Well, you need a little change in your day, a little challenge.
Funnily enough, there was the stud manager, the stable manager at Burley this year. He had a little black bitch called Widget, and I fell in love with it. And he rang me yesterday and said she's had a litter of pups. And I'm like, oh, my wife's going to kill me. My wife's going to kill me. Because we've said we'll wait until my dog's no longer with us before we have another. But
right,
I really want one of these little black dogs. Yeah, yeah, she's beautiful.
Okay. Well, we won't air this until you get the dog. If you're ever stumped on a case or need backup, who would you call?
So the group of people we formed, Robert Shave is, I speak to him most working days. If I have something out of the norm, I'll probably try and approach the person that may deal with those things. I had a really windswept foal, and I rang Simon Curtis.
Right, of course.
Just for a chat. To give him grief more than anything.
Yep.
But yeah, Robert is my go-to person, but I speak to Simon Moore quite a lot as well.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a favorite shoe or package for a mystery lameness?
Handmaids. Plenty of pitch, fitted correctly, with a 3M a third millennium pad. Christmas tree pad would be my go-to. A lot of the vets now are asking us to put them on, and I say to the owner, I said, look, it's the same price as a call out for a vet. So if we put it on, we're not losing anything. Right. Certainly this last year, when the ground gets hard here with the eventers, that tends to be something that makes a big difference.
Right. And then they're not losing traction out on the...
No, I don't. I haven't had... I used to have that problem when we had the pouring pads.
Yeah.
Which they did a job, but actually the pads we've got now, I've just been speaking to Derek.
Yeah, me too.
Because I would like a medial heel lift pad, because I grind the 2 degrees down at the outside to make a medial heel lift. That's probably the medial lateral balance is how I think horses, you make them sound, rather than the shoe itself.
Right. He's the guy to talk to for sure. Sounds like he's always innovating. What do you use as your planner or diary?
Phone. Yeah, iPhone. Because Sam, my right-hand man, he is in another vehicle sometimes. We try and go out together, but there is days when we are on our own, and he can book people in at the same time.
Right.
So it's great. It's only gone wrong once, and I think it's my fault that I wiped out several people.
Oh, okay. I hate that feeling when you figure out that you have.
Mainly my osteopath appointments. When she's ringing me saying, Stephen, are you coming today? I'm sorry.
Favorite method of soothing aches and pains? That might have been part of that answer.
I think they're more mental aches and pains these days. So Guinness, real ale. I've got a massage chair, not a particularly flash one, but I sometimes sit in that.
Yeah.
Just getting a chance to. Not stopping. I think keeping moving is definitely one way of keeping it at bay.
Right. Yeah. I guess maybe you just answered your favorite drink question too.
I'd say real ale.
Okay.
But there won't be any decent real ale here, so I'll be on Guinness today.
Favorite song?
With or Without You by U2.
Okay. Do you work out?
No.
What would you have been if not a farrier?
I would have followed in my dad's footsteps, like with horses, like training, pointers probably, or dealing, buying and selling horses. Maybe a farmer if I had some land.
Right.
Or more land than I've got. Or I would have gone into hunt service.
Right.
So I'd be a whipper-in or a huntsman. That was the other thing.
And then the question you've been pondering, the COVID question, who would you want to be stuck in a shop with for a month?
So out of the people I've met, it would be the late Richard Ellis.
Okay.
Because that man thought about everything.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely everything. I hadn't spent a lot of time with him. I had made hammers and been on forging days with him and so on. Which, yeah, he's an amazing man. He works out a better way of doing things. And going back to the hammer, holding a hammer, he actually felt that when he slow videoed himself forging steel, that he wasn't hardly holding his hammer when it struck the metal. And he's just somebody who analysed everything. Out of the people I've met, but then on Facebook, you look at a lot of the American guys, and I think some of the crazy shit they do. I think Riley Kirkpatrick, I spent a month with him. I'd have kitchen utensils.
Yep. Everything you'd need.
Or Mr. Paul, make a load of rifles. But, I think that's something a bit different from just making horseshoes. So I think there's lots of people I follow on Facebook a bit who I think, God, I'd love to spend a few days with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure a lot of them are just a phone call away.
Yeah. I need to do it before I get too old.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and coming back.
No, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.